Welcome to Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network. Our guest this week has had quite an extraordinary life. After growing up inside the Detroit Pistons organization, he moved to Alaska to pursue a passion for hard work and his own music. He's done both, including lumberjacking and completing a 6-year world tour. His new album will be out in September on Blue Arrow Records called Come Down Lonesome. And in the words of Bob Cratchit, it's a triumph! Mixing folk and blues with noise rock and feedback. Follow Ethan on Facebook or at ethandanieldavidson.com for news, or check him out on Blue Arrow Records. Follow us at Performance ANX and subscribe, rate, and review. Check us out and a host of other great shows on the Pantheon podcasts, including some really cool shows like Long May You Young, where hosts Mike Shue and the Condon Boys review every Neil Young album, chronologically and hilariously. Now hold on to your hats because this is a wild one with Ethan Daniel Davidson on Performance Anxiety on Pantheon Podcast Network.
Sure. So I'm Ethan Daniel Davidson, and I'm here on Performance Anxiety, with Performance Anxiety, although not so anxious at the moment, getting pretty relaxed now. And the new record is called Come Down Lonesome. Thanks.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I don't get to do too many podcasts outdoors.
No, I suppose not. It's hard to move the studio outdoors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Things are good?
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
So this is
it's been a strange life.
Yeah, very interesting life, that's for sure.
Right.
I did get a chance to listen to the latest album, which we will get into, but I want to find out a little bit more about how you got to the latest album. And I guess that all kind of starts with growing up.
Yeah.
Was your family a musical family? Was there a lot of music in the household?
Not particularly, actually. I guess my grandmother played some mandolin, but not really at all by the time that I came along. She was pretty elderly by then.
Okay.
I do have her mandolin. It's like a 1914 Gibson.
Oh, wow.
Style, and still in pretty good shape. But no, we didn't really have it in the house too much. I mean, we had some records.
Oh, wow. Jeez. Well, your family was more of a sports family.
Sports family for sure. Sports and glass.
And that's kind of wild because your dad was huge in industry and ended up buying the Detroit Pistons. How did you get into music with all that in the background?
Well, I was at public high school back in the 80s, just the local high school town where I lived. And, we were, I guess, pretty lucky in that out there in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, they had jazz band and orchestra and that kind of thing, but they also had like rock.
Okay.
And keep in mind, this is like the 80s, so this wasn't like, I don't know how many schools have these things now. I guess they cut music program together, like a rock and roll band, and it was headed by an English teacher.
Wow.
And he was really interested in old R&B and old blues records and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
Old soul records. And he approached me one day and he said, I know you're kind of into music and you don't really do any of your schoolwork, but I'll make a deal with you. If you focus on your schoolwork, I'll teach you how to play, all those old R&B records and all those old soul records. So
wow.
I said, yeah, why not? So I played in a rock band, the high school rock band for 2 years. And because of that, I really credit him for helping me get into college, but also into music. I don't know if one of those is good or one of those is bad, but that's the story.
So
that's out of college, kids, right?
Yeah. Okay, so it basically started off with guitar then.
Yeah. Started out with guitar and bass as well, but and then I was a bass player for hire for a number of years, and then sort of later on became a singer-songwriter, I guess they call it, anti-folk. I became an anti-folk singer originally.
But all the old blues and soul records, that was what interested you from the beginning then.
Yeah, I always liked that stuff. I liked all the old R&B stuff and all the old blues records, especially like the old primitive blues records, the old recordings, and that stuff really caught my attention pretty early on. I mean, I'd been like a punk, like a punk music guy, I guess, in the 80s.
Okay.
But the stuff that really kind of hit me, the stuff that really kind of grabbed my heart, I guess, was all the old R&B stuff, but really all those old records, and later on all the old country records as well.
Okay. So you're into like the old Capricorn records, like Elmore James.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where it is, Oh. Well, listen, this English teacher, his name was Bill Chrisman. He's still around. I'm still in touch with him.
Oh, cool.
He was from Missouri. He'd grown up in Missouri in the 60s, down near the Mississippi River. So that was like in the water for him. I think that's why, he came by it pretty honestly, and that was all the music that he knew.
Oh man! Well, since you like that stuff, I'll give you a quick story.
Sure.
My wife and my wife was born and raised in Alabama.
Yeah.
And I grew up and down the East Coast. I was born in Texas, lived in New Jersey, Virginia, and I'm in Virginia again right now, but moved to Alabama for a decade or so. And my wife's mother worked with this lady. Her name Jackie. She was just Miss Jackie to everybody.
Right.
And she was the sweetest lady. And we were talking, and she knew I liked music a lot. And she said, my dad used to play the blues a lot. I'm like, oh, okay. So I started talking to her about some old blues music. And she's like, he recorded some stuff. It's like, I wonder if you can find it. Okay, yeah, I'll look around for it, because this was early 2000s. So it was, the internet was still kind of in its infancy, but it was still a cool place to go browsing and hunting, searching stuff down. So I said, yeah, I'll look. What's his name? She said, well, his real name was James Founty. I said, okay. She said, but he didn't record under that name. He recorded under the name Dan Pickett.
Wow. Okay.
So I said, okay. And I looked, and I found an entire album's worth of stuff. They had some I think it's a collectible music or something, had rounded up an entire album's worth of recordings that he had done and released it.
Wow.
Straight life parties, a second accident too. The next thing that's gonna happen, and you didn't no more. Ride your baby on a V. She thinks you wild, so baby, but you just don't know. 6 white horse, a haul you to Dree. I'll meet today, a big one dressed and dirt in your feet. And I'm ride your
And so I found it, and I bought 2 copies, bought one for myself, and I gave her one, and it was crazy. She said he wasn't around much. He was always out playing in the juke joints and stuff. So
right.
So if you like that stuff, look for Dan Pickett.
I'll write it down.
Yeah, the album's called Country Blues.
That sounds good.
But so all right, so that's awesome, because that's the kind of stuff that I really kind of went to. I started off listening to all the typical stuff that a teenager in the late 80s, early 90s ended up listening to, and Led Zeppelin and all that, and ended up wanting to go back to find out where they got their inspirations. And that's what got me into Elmore James and Robert Johnson and Howlin' Wolf and all that stuff. So I love that stuff. Otis Rush is one of my favorites.
That's the music right there.
Oh yeah. So this is really cool to be talking to somebody else who's just as into that stuff. So so at what point did you decide, well, this is what I want to do. I want to be a musician. And I'm not going to go work for the Pistons. I'm not going to go work for any of the industrial companies. I want to be a musician.
Well, I've been like, I guess when I was in college, I was always kind of playing in some bands, and I was working for the Pistons, on and off. And, we had an arena at that time that I was working on and off, and I was a stagehand for different bands. And,
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and at the arena there, I was doing that.
Yeah.
And then, I was on and off touring as a bass player for hire with different bands. Nobody that ever got famous. And then, when I graduated college, to make a long story short, I, quit all that. I went off and this is my time to go on an adventure. I went to Alaska, and I lived up there for a little while. Man. And I was, cutting trees. I was a lumberjack, and wow. I would, had a little guitar with me, and I'd play these songs. And the people in this small village were like, you should go off and be a singer-songwriter. I don't know. Maybe they were trying to get rid of me. I'm not sure. But they're like, you should go. You should go play at places. So I thought, maybe that's not a bad idea. So I told my dad, I said, I'm not coming back to work for the Pistons. I'm going to give this music thing one last shot. And actually, he had gotten involved at that point with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he said, well, I really want you to move to Tampa Bay. I said, no. I'm going to try this music thing for a year. Okay. And he wasn't too happy about that, but but in the end, he was like, okay, fine, do your thing. Right. And then I ended up on this 6-year tour as a singer-songwriter that took me all over the world. But that's how it really happened, where, it was just living up there in Alaska, and and I thought, why the hell not? I mean, other people can do it. Why can't I do it? But not everybody chooses Alaska. What made you pick Alaska? Well, I went there on a camping trip with some buddies. Originally, we just were going to canoe this river up in the Arctic, and for like a week. And anyway, we while we were out there in a national park called Gates of the Arctic National Park, we met this lost backpacker, and I like to say that we saved his life, because he hadn't seen anybody for a week, and he hadn't eaten in 4 days, and he was totally lost. Jeez. And so we had to get him to this town, and as a result, I ended up with an abandoned cabin in this small Alaskan town. Oh. So I stayed, right? Everybody else went home, but I'm staying in Alaska. Wow. Jeez. I still own the cabin. I still have the cabin, but I haven't been there at this point. I haven't been there in years. Oh my God! But I used to go there quite a bit, and I spent a couple winters there, and that was like living 150 years in the past. Oh, I can imagine. I think I heard that. Was that the Roland story? Yeah, Roland. Roland was that guy's name. Man, yeah, he's still around. He is? Okay, I was going to ask if you've ever heard from him again. Oh yeah, we found each other years later. He was like. He wrote me after years and years. He wrote me. He said, I found one of your records in the cutout bin here in Germany, in the used record bin in Germany. And you tell funny stories about me being lost in Alaska. So I said, well, sorry, are you upset about it? And he's like, no, I think it's great. I think it's funny. Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, that is crazy. Yeah. All right, and so what time frame was this? I went to Alaska in 96, 97. Okay. 1996, 97. And then I was there on and off for the next couple of years. I started the round the world 6-year tour in 1999. Okay. And that was through the end of 2005, and it was like 150 shows a year. And wow. It was amazing, It was amazing. And I'll say this, because your show is called Performance Anxiety, and the funny thing is, I never had stage fright until I stopped touring. And after really? That 6-year tour, when I, it's you get when you're living that way where you're just totally on the job. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 straight years, living in your van. And then you leave that lifestyle, it's pretty it's pretty like, it's like whiplash, right? And
Wow.
and then I started to get, let's say, performance anxiety, stage fright, whatever you want to call it, when I would pick up a guitar. But it was only after playing, literally like thousands of shows.
Wow.
And then I couldn't touch a guitar for like 3 or 4 years, and finally got back into it, which led to these more recent albums.
So was this 6-year tour, was that planned from the start, or did you just say, I'm going out on the road, and when I'm done, I'm done?
It was like it was kind of that. I mean, I had, from having been a bass player for hire before that, I knew clubs in certain parts of the country, and, I knew people around, and I said, hey, I'm doing, this thing now. I'm just playing under my own name. Can I come play? And so I started to do it that way. And then the trick was just to like link those different parts of the country up.
Wow.
But, after a while, it was kind of a circuit, and it became kind of self-perpetuating. But, at some point, I'd say like a good 4 years into it, I was getting pretty exhausted. But by then it was sort of rolling on its own. So it was like hard to, I couldn't just, it was hard to leave. Yeah. Right. And, but at some point I was talking to my dad, and he said he was thinking about, leaving all his money to charity. He was a self-made guy, built his own businesses, and he was planning for the future, and he said he wanted to give it all away. And would I come back to Detroit and do that? I said, I'll come back as soon as I said, I won't book any more gigs. As soon as I'm done with what I'm committed to, I'll come back. So that was, wow. So I ended up back in Detroit after all that.
Oh man.
Which I swore I would never do.
Yeah. That's the case sometimes. I've talked to a few people that I'm never going to do that. And I mean, it's happened to me a few times, to be honest with you, but
right. So, no, I know. It's like, don't say what you'll never do. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, never say never. And I think that's a Bond movie.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So, when did the Ethan Daniel Davidson 5 happen?
That was at the end of the. That was the last album that came out during that 6-year tour.
Okay.
Period. And that was the last group of guys that I was sort of playing with on the road. Okay,
because that seemed a little heavier than the other stuff that you put out prior to that.
Yeah. It was. I wanted to make a record with the guys that I'd been playing with, rather than just make an Ethan record, either solo or with a backing band. I thought it'll be good to do something with a band, and so that was the record we made. It's funny because I haven't listened to it in so long, and I don't know like how I would feel about it now. Although some of the songs on it I'll still play for myself, like on guitar. But it's. But yeah, that was sort of the end of that whole tour thing.
Did that whole tour start off with just you solo and acoustic, and then become?
Yeah, the first 3 years was just me by myself in a van, and that's if you ever get a chance to live completely alone for 3 years in a van, that's an experience not to miss.
Oh my God.
or maybe to really miss.
Well, if I pose that to my wife, I'm sure she's like, you're going to have to miss that one.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, it was strange because, what I used to liken it to was, because I lived in different places before that, Detroit and San Francisco and Chicago, Alaska, what have you, and you have friends in these places, right? You live somewhere long enough, you develop relationships and your friends. But then when you don't live anywhere anymore, like truly don't live anywhere. I'm not even talking about living permanently under a bridge. I'm talking about like moving every day for years. You end up like. What I likened it to was living like a ghost, because, you come in and out of town and you sort of know people in every town after a while, but you don't know anybody really that well. And the people back home in whatever town you lived in, they become used to not having you around, and they sort of move on with their lives, and you're not really a part of it anymore. So it's probably as close an experience as you can have to like actually being a ghost.
Wow. Wow. I didn't even thought of it like that. Jeez.
Yeah. It's different with a band. When I did the 3 years with a band, you're with a bunch of guys and you've got each other. But when you're 3 years, on your own in a van, you got to get pretty comfortable with your demons pretty quickly.
I bet. Wow. Did that have an effect on the types of music you were writing?
Yeah. I think it did. Because I think socially I'm not really that dark of a guy.
Right.
But what comes out in the music, especially after that, is a lot of kind of dark characters. So they're in there somewhere in me, but it's not something that I sort of wrestle with on a day-to-day basis in my social life, Right. But it definitely, there's some stuff that comes to the surface when you're alone all the time.
Oh yeah. Bet.
Yeah.
I'm never alone.
And it's and it's still, that always has, I think living that way always it's been 15 years, but it always has an effect on you afterwards, I think.
Oh, I can imagine. I had the exact opposite. I'm married with 3 kids, and they're all teenagers. So
they're teenagers.
Let's see.
Mine are almost teenagers.
Oh, I've got a 15, 16, and 17-year-old.
No kidding. That's pretty good.
2 girls and a boy right in the middle.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Oh, it's crazy. Someone's always, and they all play music. They're all in the high school band, marching band. So they're all brass. I got a trumpet, a tuba, and a French horn. So my house is
noisy house.
Oh, it's noisy. It's just a cacophony.
Yeah.
Between them practicing their instruments and playing the music that they like, it's just nonstop noise. It drives my wife insane.
Sure.
I tend to tune it out a bit. I for some reason I've got that my daughter's she's walking over here dancing to her music right now. But I've got something where I can just kind of block it out and not pay attention.
Sure. You have to.
Yeah, exactly. But she doesn't have that. My wife it just drives her nuts. So I've got the exact opposite where there's no way I'm going to be alone. The only time I'm alone is in the bathroom.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Right, exactly. Well, no, look, when you get married, and I got married, we just had our 13th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
And thank you. Yeah, just a week ago.
Oh, awesome.
And yeah, thanks. And I took my wife for a walk in the woods behind our house here. And I said, I want to show you something. We go back in the woods, and there's a mariachi band way back there. There's a mariachi band in the woods. I'm like, happy anniversary. So
that's awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Arthur's coming up in October. I'm going to have to think of something like that. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah.
If we can go outside again, I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know.
We'll have to see. Things are loosening up around here, but
yeah, it's a little tough, but it's tough, but you do what you can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right. So you took a break for a few years in around 2005. And so what were you doing between 2005 and I think the next album came out in 2012?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think, that's right. Well, I came back to Detroit and, my father, because he was going to, do this charity, thing, and this family foundation. And I got back here and I said, okay, so what do we do? And he's like, well, I'm not gonna fund it until after I die. So how about you work for the Pistons? So I'm like, okay, great. So,
that sounds a little sneaky.
Yeah, it was the old, it was like a 3-card Monty.
Yeah.
And the old bait and switch there, real nice. And no, but it was cool. So, I ended up back working for the Pistons for just a little while. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to go back to music right now. I had discovered all of a sudden that I had stage fright, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, and I'm not that excited about working for the Pistons. And anyway, my father's going to, hopefully live for a long time. It turns out that he didn't.
Oh.
But I said, okay, what else do I want to do? And I said, well, I always wanted to study Middle Eastern politics and that sort of thing. So I went back to grad school and was studying Islamic law at University of Michigan. Yeah. And then in the middle of that, unfortunately, my father passed away, and then the dealing with all his charity stuff became like a real job. So
yeah,
I quit grad school, started helping with that, but I was always, sort of writing songs here and there, but I was afraid to play them. I had all this anxiety, and my wife and Warren DeFever from His Name Is Alive, said, we're going to put together a little, recording session, no big deal. Just come in and let's see what happens. So that ended up being that Tooth record that came out in 2012.
Well, hang me, I'll be dead and gone. Wouldn't mind the hanging, but the laying in the grave so long. Well, the days when we were wild and free, all the things I thought we'd be, honey, that's a long time gone. Your deck of 51 with the jacks all torn apart holds no ace of spades. Now I hold it in my heart. Well, I used to have a hand to lend.
And then since then we've made a few more, and I'm pretty happy with these last bunch of records because I don't really take it all that. There's no pressure. It's not that I don't take it seriously. I take it very seriously. I'm serious about the songs.
Yeah.
I want the product to be good. I want it to, and it's not, I don't mean product like that, but what comes out.
The end result.
The end result. I want it to be good.
Yeah.
And so I take it seriously, but on the other hand, I don't really, I'm not trying to be in the music business. Whatever happens, it happens. Somebody comes and says, we want to put a song in a film. Yeah, that's cool. Fine.
Yeah. It's funny. There's a couple parallels here because along with the blues, when I went off to college, I went to Rochester Institute of Technology for photography.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was able to I was a photographer for a good 10, 12 years until we started having kids. Yeah. And all our health insurance was through my wife's job. She's like, I want to stay home with the kids. Okay, that's great. And then that means I got to get a real job.
Right.
Okay. No problem. So I did that up until recently. I just kind of put the photography down and just, took pictures of the kids and occasionally did something a little, funky on the side, but, nothing for any publication. It was all just for me.
Yeah.
And then I had a weird coincidence happen. I was friends with a couple people on Facebook, some bands that I would follow back in the 90s that I loved. I would follow them on Facebook, some of the guys in the bands just to see what they were doing because the bands themselves weren't actually active.
Yeah.
So I kind of started chatting with some of these guys, and one was a guy named Kelly Scott from Failure. Mm-hmm. And they reunited in 2014, and then they started touring again. So their last tour, they came to DC, and I'm like, you know what? I had just recently got a new camera body, and I'm like, you know what? Like, hey Kelly, how about toss me a media pass?
Right.
Because we would talk a lot, but I never actually met him in person. And so he's like, yeah, I'll shoot you one. Just come on down. We'll meet before the show and all. I'm like, yeah, awesome. And from that, I started shooting a lot of live music events up until recently for a couple of local DC blogs and all. And it's kind of like you. It's something that I love doing again because I don't have the pressure of having to make a living at it.
Exactly. Oh yeah, no, I mean I can 100% relate to that.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
No, exactly.
I don't usually get guests I can relate to.
That's good. Well, we should do it more often.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Now, you said you were writing songs this whole I guess most
here
of
and
that
there.
time.
Here and there. I mean, it was kind of, it was made. the songs for me, they always they can come in bunches and then have a big dry spell.
Okay.
And I never know. I don't know how it works, really, to tell you the truth. And but so every once in a while in that period, there'd be like something would pop out, and I gotta like write this down. And so I had a handful of things that I had ready to record for that Silvertooth record, and then there were a couple on there that were just like, we made up like right in the studio.
Okay.
And or I wrote while I was sitting on the couch in the studio or something, and I think it all came out pretty well. I mean, that's a record that I still enjoy, and I don't spend a lot of time listening to my own records. It's like I don't spend a lot of time looking at myself in the mirror either. But it's like it's weird, right? I mean,
yeah.
But I think that record is, I think just because of the, I wasn't trying to do anything, just trying to make a record. That's all.
Oh, yeah. So you had no expectations, really.
I had no expectations, exactly.
So you're just free and you just kind of did what you want.
Yeah, just did what I wanted to do.
Well, I was listening to a lot.
And who cares if they don't like it? Who cares if they don't like it?
Yeah, exactly. You're not trying to live off of what you make off that album. So
yeah, I'm lucky that way for sure.
And I went back and I started listening to the old albums recently because I like to do research on people when I talk to them and find out some things so I know what to ask. And I'll tell you, the albums are awesome.
Thanks.
Weird Trainwreck Run on Time. I love that track.
Take your tricks out of Roseburg on those maps you never read, like the time you stole his trophies, lost them among the weeds. Leave your tears for the night to come.
Thank you.
Till the Light Comes Shining In, Delilah versus Samson. They're really cool tracks, and it's not all like folksy Americana kind of stuff. Some of it's R&B and soul mixed into it.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Now, when you're writing, let's say something like Samson versus Delilah versus Samson, I'm getting it backwards.
Yeah, right.
Does that start off?
I had to put Delilah in the. Well, she was always in the power position anyway, but I wanted to make it clear she was.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. Now, when you're writing that kind of stuff, do you have it in mind that I'm going to add horns to this and it's going to be more of a soul R&B kind of sound, or is it just progress that way as you're writing it?
Well, I think I had always wanted to do something with horn. I hadn't ever worked with horn players actually since I was in the high school rock band where we had a horn section.
Oh, okay.
But, as like doing my own thing, I had just never done that. And I always was like, that would be cool. That'd be amazing. But, of course, when I was touring all the time, I didn't have room for all of those kind of guys. But, when I started working on Silvertooth and Draw Nigh, I thought, well, this is a perfect time to try some of that. So, I asked Warren, find me a couple of horn players. And, so we had trumpet, trombone, and saxophone and baritone sax. And it was cool. I mean, that's like, that's like a whole different language once you get those guys involved, especially when they're in there as a section. And then, then you want to try to like, okay, well, if I got these guys, what kind of thing can I write that is a little outside of, or maybe, very much outside of what I'd done before. Cause you don't want to keep writing the same song over and over again.
Yeah.
So, I go back to some of those old records that's either old R&B records, or I think in the case of Delilah versus Samson, it was like, even trying to get some like, almost kind of show tuney or musical theater kind of changes, stuff that I'd never, stuff that obviously I had listened to and was familiar with, but not stuff that I had ever used in my own songwriting. It's like,
okay,
what sort of things can I rip off that I've never ripped off before? Yeah. I mean, that's what it is,
I think a lot of music.
Nobody borrows from me. They don't listen to my records. But I borrow from them.
Well, your records are really interesting in the fact that you use a couple of things that don't get used a lot in a lot of new records, horns and biblical references.
Yeah. Well, I grew up going to a religious Jewish school.
Yeah.
And it's still something that I'm, I was in college for a little while. I was a philosophy student at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And, and then of course, again, studying Islamic law, and I was always interested in religion and in philosophy. And I think it was just something that, was always, it really, I think, forms the basis of a lot of what I try to deal with lyrically in the song, in the songs.
Yeah. I've noticed that happens with a lot of, not necessarily the horns, but the biblical references and influences in a lot of Americana acts. Yeah.
It's just that a lot of those guys are actually Christians, and there's not so many of us Jews.
That's true. That's a good...
Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, you know what? Those are
Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys.
Yeah. One of these days, somebody's going to know those guys too.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, but it's funny because you hear it in stuff like anything by David Eugene Edwards and all that. Yeah. And that's what I like is that musically I can hear some like 16 horsepower, which I've loved forever.
Oh yeah.
But it's not as fire and brimstone because he gets a little intense. Your music can be more listenable than David's sometimes. Sometimes he goes a little intense.
Yeah, I think it's probably a difference between a really Christian approach, I guess. I've thought about exactly what you're saying. Christians, I think especially, and I'm not saying anything negative, and I hope, nobody takes offense to this. I'm just offering my own observation. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people that are writing from a Christian perspective, especially when they're coming, maybe from the South, in Baptist culture, white Baptist culture, there is a lot of fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
Which is not, it's not there in the Jewish thing. The Jewish thing is like, what's the question? What is this even supposed to mean? Right. And, it's originally a Jewish book, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's more it's, what should I say? The name Israel, it means wrestling with God, right?
Okay.
So that's, I think, really what the thing is more than fire and brimstone from a Jewish perspective. It's like, I'm really just trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm wrestling over here.
Okay.
Right. It's a question. It's all a big question.
That's really interesting because, like you said, with a lot of the fundamental approach to Christianity, which I know in seeing some documentaries, because I'm a huge David Eugene Edwards fan. In fact, today, the album he just did with Alexander Haka, I ordered just came in. So Alexander Haka, former podcast guest.
Oh, is that very good?
Yeah.
Nice.
So David did an album with him called Risha, and it's really interesting. But I'm a huge fan of his, and it's weird to be a huge fan of somebody that not too many people know about, I guess. Because anything that pops up that they do, it's like, I've got to get it. I've got to find it. And so I saw some documentaries, and I remember he had mentioned in one that his grandfather, I think, was this real fundamentalist fire and brimstone preacher that really, really seeped its way into his core. And that comes out in a lot of his work. In fact, when Woven Hand came around here in March, I was able to get media passes for one of the blogs I shoot for, and I was able to take some pretty intense photos of him. He's just that intense live too. So
right.
And I imagine your shows.
I
imagine your shows tend to be a little more fun.
I don't know. I always think like, it's funny because people always are like, you're a musician. You should come play it. We're doing some event. You should come play it. And I'm like, my songs deal with some pretty dark subject matter. I think if you get me, people will probably leave. You probably don't want. You probably want to consider somebody else. It's not really background music, But
yeah, that's true.
But it is like, no. It's in all seriousness. When I used to, when I was doing it myself years ago, and it was like kind of the anti-folk show. There were a lot of jokes. There was a lot of irreverent humor. There was like a lot of, silly kind of songs.
Yeah.
And it was also serious. I mean, I was talking about anti-racism and these kind of things and gay marriage and all this, support for that. And so it was serious and funny and irreverent or trying to be funny. That's in the eye of the beholder.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I think it was an entertaining show. It definitely offended some people.
Which it's supposed to, maybe.
Yeah, it's like if you don't break something, you're not doing it right.
Exactly.
So, but that's what the show was, and and I still try to be. I still like to communicate with the audience and to share something that I hope they'll find, funny, and that I hope they'll find, sort of touching, I guess, on a spiritual level. There's not the right word for it. Touching's a silly word, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want people to like, I want, hopefully people feel like they didn't waste their time coming to see me.
Okay. Yeah.
Like they come out of that and they're like, okay, well, I feel like somehow, this was a really worthwhile, evening for me to come out and see this jackass on the stage.
Well, since you started writing again, you've released. Well, you're about to release your fourth album.
Fourth album of since I started. I think overall it's like 11th but it's the fourth since I started doing this whole thing again.
Yeah, and what I liked, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I think I noticed this, is that the CD and LP releases have different artwork.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. I absolutely love when artists will do that.
Yeah. I've seen, I can't remember, but it seems like, what, there was a Sonic Youth record. I can't remember which one it was. It was on it was CD. I don't know what they did on the vinyl one because I never got the vinyl of it. But the CD had didn't have a booklet in it. It had everything was on separate cards, so you could make your own cover.
Oh, cool.
I can't remember which record that was. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I always thought, yeah, that's cool. So when we did this new one, the Come Down Lonesome. I was also really interested in, the old Black Sparrow Press books. It was like Charles Bukowski and that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wanda Coleman and Andrei Krzyzewski, those kind of writers. And they were on they were at this publishing company called Black Sparrow Press.
Okay.
And Black Sparrow went out of business, ages ago at this point. But I was a collector of those books when I heard they were going out of business because the covers, I liked those writers first of all, but the paper and the cardstock of the covers was so unlike anything I'd ever seen or felt or held before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and if you should try to, if we're ever in bookstores again, go try to find original edition Black Sparrow Press books.
Oh, I will.
And I always thought, man, I'd love to do a record that has that kind of feel. It's something like I want to hold this, you're giving somebody a piece of music. Okay, great. But you want to, if it can operate on a lot of different levels, a lot of different kinds of levels of experience, all the better. So I want to give them something that's nice to hold, And so I met a guy that's like, oh yeah, I know where to get that card stock.
Oh,
and
cool.
I said, let's do it.
Hey, why not? And the artwork is awesome because, like we've mentioned a few times, the music is kind of folksy, Americana.
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, you've got a healthy dose there, especially on the new album, of some Sonic Youth, Space Needle kind of crazy noisescapes. And which I absolutely adore. I love that stuff.
Thanks.
But the artwork is really cool. The photographs specifically are the old daguerreotype, tintype kind of look to them, which I being a photographer, I absolutely love that stuff.
Oh yeah.
So I love your artwork. But
well, thank you. Yeah, there was a guy named Alan Barnes. You'll appreciate this because you're a photographer. This guy named Alan Barnes who I got in touch with at some point years ago. This is some of the photographs we used. I think he teaches photography at UCLA or I forget, somewhere in California.
Okay.
Anyway, he's like, how about we shoot some photos on this, old equipment from the 1870s.
Wow.
So I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. And it was, so you know how this stuff works. I mean, we were shooting like 2 plates at a time.
Yeah.
And then you had to go develop them right away.
Yep.
And so every 2 photographs took like, 15, 20 minutes to do. So in the course of a whole day, like 8 hours or something crazy, we got like, 16 photographs.
Yeah.
and it's not, that's how they used to have to do it.
Yeah. And you've got to be sitting there usually with a brace on because you have to be still.
You can't move.
So so you've got to be posed and sitting there completely still, which is why you see some of these old photographs have some of the subject matter, the people on them have these weird ghost images or their eyes look blank. They may have blinked a couple of times while they're doing it, and it just their eyes look white, and it's just you get this really creepy effect.
They look totally intense.
Yeah,
in a way that it'd be like people now try to look like that, and people will try to be all intense in photographs, and they just look like I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It looks a little silly.
Yeah,
but the way that those old cameras worked, I mean, it made the people look super serious.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You can't. I don't think there's any way. They don't make like a plug-in for digital photography. Well, you just have to sit there for that long.
Well, and the thing is, if you think about it, one of the reasons everybody looks so intense is because if you're taking a photograph and you have to sit still for 7 to 10 minutes, you can't hold a smile for that long.
I know, right? Exactly.
So you just got to kind of stand there looking kind of dour, really.
Exactly. Exactly. I know, it was pretty wild.
So
I was really interested too. One last thing, which blows me away since we're mentioning it. I asked him. I said, "So what did these guys do back? You're telling me this camera's from the 1870s, all this equipment. What did these guys do? You see these Matthew Brady's photographs from the American Civil War.
Yeah.
And he said, he had to take in a wagon, thousands and thousands of gallons worth of chemicals.
Yeah.
Weigh like thousands of pounds." Dragging them all up and down these bumpy roads all over America, and then a wagon that was a dark room.
Yeah,
had to be impervious to light, and man, that's that's dedication.
It really is. I mean,
that guy has to really want to take those photographs.
and it was a new medium back then too.
Exactly.
It was that was tech back then.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you think about it, the development in photochemicals up until really the emergence of digital was amazing. Because the chemicals to develop silver, those enormous silver plates is very caustic.
That's chaos. Absolutely. You don't want to come into contact with that stuff.
I'll tell you a weird story. I had one of my favorite teachers at RIT was a guy named Tom Perez.
Yeah,
amazing photographer, great guy. But you'd have to use tongs. So when you put a print in all the chemicals, you're supposed to use tongs, wooden tongs with these plastic ends, and you dip it in, you let it sit there, and you move it around to each chemical.
Yeah.
Tom, for years, was like, you don't need to do that. And would just use his hands. And it got to the point, and you think about safety regulations, nowadays, even, this was like 91, 92. By that point, the chemicals were still a lot safer than they were back in 1860 something.
Yeah, yeah.
But Tom had been doing that for so long that he couldn't sweat through his hands.
Oh, God. Yeah, right.
So this stuff, imagine how horrible those chemicals had to be back then.
Oh, man.
And they're sloshing around and then wagging.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the new album, let's talk a little bit about the new album, Come Down Lonesome.
Yeah.
It is amazing. It seems to be a little more, I don't want to say focused, but musically a little bit more focused than the other albums. It's a little heavier, little more noise in it, and it less of the horns and things.
Oh yeah.
Was that a conscious choice, or was it just that's the way the songs developed?
Yeah, it was. No, it was definitely a conscious sort of a thing. It's interesting because first of all, it was like, I sometimes go through these things. I know all these old folk songs,
right.
and
after 6 years of touring, you should.
Yeah, exactly. And I like to play them, for myself, and sometimes I like to record them. So usually what happens is when I go into the studio with some guys and we go to record, my songs, we'll start out with just whatever pops into my head, and it's usually could be any old song, right? Okay. And then, Warren and my wife Gretchen and, some of the guys I was playing with were like, well, why don't we, that was cool. Why don't we record that too? So, then it's like, okay, let's do that. And, but then I don't want to do those old folk songs in just kind of a straight kind of way that,
everybody else has done them.
Everybody else. Right. So, my wife, still tours the world in this noise band called Universal Eyes. Sometimes they're called Wolf Eyes and sometimes Universal Indians. And anyway, they go out and they play around and do that. So we thought, well, why don't we, combine that? I mean, I've never really done the really noisy stuff like that. So,
awesome.
Let's just have everything going at the same time. and I like to play these other wacky instruments too. I always have, like, I think, I do some electric kalimba on some of that stuff, and I like to play these old banjos, and
the Hurdy Gurdy. How did you start with the Hurdy Gurdy? I don't imagine that's something you just pick up. I'm gonna start playing the Hurdy Gurdy today.
I know, yeah, exactly. I found one years ago, and I never really learned how to play it. I just if you just crank the wheel on it, if people have never seen a Hurdy Gurdy, it's like how do you describe it? It works similar to a violin, I guess, but because it's like the strings are like vibrated against but it's not a bow, it's like a wheel, so it's kind of a continuous
with a crank
sound. It's a crank, yeah. And it's like 7 or 8 strings, and they're just all kind of going
some are strings you can play, some are drone strings.
Exactly. So I pretty much got it just to drone, and when you set it up there with like an Indian tempura, like the drone sitar, and or the Shruti box, which is the electronic Indian drone thing. It just makes a really intense, pretty dark, evil under foundation, and everything else just you hear all that, and it's like, oh man, we're in trouble now.
Well, I love it. And I love the feedback and all the noise that you do on the Dylan cover. I dreamed I saw St. Augustine. Oh
yeah.
That, oh my gosh, that sound, the the effect that you got, that's what I live for. That's the stuff that I absolutely love.
Thanks.
Just noise, and I love feedback. I don't know how to describe why. I don't know why. I just love this slightly out of control sound of it sounds, because it sounds like something's about to explode.
I hear you. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's funny because I always like that stuff too. You know, I just haven't done that much of it, but I always like to listen to it. And somebody, when I released it on online, I got like an angry letter from somebody that's like, I don't understand what's going on. Something's wrong with the band, you know. There's all this, like, I don't think you recorded it right. And like, why you wouldn't do that? Why would you do that on purpose? And and I'm like, man, I wrote him back. I'm like, dude, I'm super sorry. I don't know what to tell you. But we did. We wanted it to be that way.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, go buy Space Needle, Smashing Pumpkins.
Exactly.
Some Sonic Youth. And
exactly. You know.
And then maybe you'll figure that one out.
Exactly. Right, for sure.
But the album's really...
Can't please everyone.
No, exactly. But the album's really cool because it kind of sounds like it could have come out in like 1968.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
It's got this really awesome bluesy, folksy stuff with the noise, and I mean, I'm looking at the track listing right now. Death Don't Have No Mercy, Leaving Cheyenne. That is awesome.
Thanks.
The water in the drop, tails are all matted, and the backs are all raw. Goodbye, old pains, I'm leaving Cheyenne. Goodbye, old pains, I'm leaving Cheyenne. Leaving Cheyenne, going to Montana. Goodbye, old pain. Leaving Cheyenne.
Lewis Collins has the feedback. Now, okay, is that the song? It sounds like there's a motorcycle gang meeting around in the background.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, that might be the one.
I love that. It just sounds like there's a whole bunch of motorcycles going, and it works. It sounds really cool.
Well, we had this being formerly in the basketball business, we had this basketball court, indoor basketball court. You know, just massive room. And so we went in there with a bunch of, do you know what bull roarers? They're like
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's like an Aboriginal Australian, Native Australian, like instrument. I guess you would call it an instrument. I don't know. I think it's really a communication device. It's basically like a flat piece of wood on the end of a long string. And when you swing it around, it kind of makes this like.
Okay, I know what that is. Yeah, I never knew what it was called.
Yeah, so we went in the gym with like a couple of us had those. We went in there with a bunch of those and swung them around, and it's just another really screwed up. It's to be in a big room like that, making that kind of noise is pretty intense.
That's got to be amazing. That's.
Old kind friends, oh, ain't it hard? See for the rest in a new graveyard. The angels lay down away. Angels lay down away.
You know, I'm not a musician. I play guitar on my own. I think in my entire life I've taken a grand total of like 2 months worth of guitar lessons.
Yeah.
But I love to make noise, and that's been one of my dreams, is just get into a big room with a whole bunch of echo and just turn my guitar all the way up and just feedback and make a whole bunch of noise.
Right, exactly.
That's been my dream.
Right? I know. It's pretty cathartic, you know. It's pretty. It's kind of healing in its own sort of way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My quest for noise never stops. I live with it, and it's always around me. But so, all right, with the covers, how did you pick the covers? Was there a reason that you picked certain covers on the album?
Well, you know, I think I'm going to throw another log on the fire here, so come with me for a minute.
Absolutely.
I think that we recorded a whole bunch of covers, really. Okay. You know, I don't even know, like, way more than what appears on the record. And, you know, hopefully those will see the light of day too. And there's also even a whole other bunch of original songs that we recorded that didn't make the cut this time, but, you know, maybe those will see the light of day at some time as well. So, you know, I don't know how much we actually recorded, but it was a lot. And at first it was like, well, we'll make a double record, man. We'll do, you know, songs in the key of life. We'll do the White Album, you know, we'll do Sandinista. And I guess those are triple albums, but,
oh gosh, yeah. But
we're like, yeah. And then Warren was like, no, we're not doing that. And so, you know, he and my wife kind of pared it down to their favorites, and then they, you know, that was that, and then they're like, so what do you want it to be? And you know, my contribution was, well, I really think it should be Come Down Lonesome, you know, which is one of the original songs on there, which is actually an old song of mine, which goes way back to my Alaska days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just never had done it before, you know, for whatever reason, you know,
wow.
had never put it on a record before, but I always really liked it. And it just, you know, and I'm like, maybe it's time to, give that one the, you know, it's like a 20-year-old song at this point. Maybe it's time for it to see the light of day.
Yeah. Give it its due.
Mm-hmm,
That's fantastic. Now, on a couple albums, you also, you've written a few you've performed and written a few songs that have the theme of washing your hands in muddy water.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What's behind that? Is there anything behind that, or is it just a theme that resonates with you somehow?
Well, I always liked that old Charlie Rich song, Wash My Hands in Muddy Water, which is the one that we cover on this album. Yeah. I think Elvis Presley might have done it too. I can't remember. But I heard the Charlie Rich version, and there were a couple other people that covered it. In any event, you know, I felt like I'm not going to play it like Charlie Rich, so I slowed it way down. It was just one of those things that we did while the microphones were on, and it sounded pretty good. I think that you know, I mean, here I guess is the thing. The way I would say, you know, about washing your hands in muddy water today, you know, and this is just my opinion as a guy that's, you know, slept under every important bridge in this country. Right. You know, there's we're living in a time where we expect some kind of, or we demand some kind of like ideological purity, right? Mm-hmm. Our leaders or whomever, and I'm not even, you know, discussing politics or the guy who sits in the Oval Office, right? But I'm just saying that, you know, we expect that everybody has to be totally perfect in the things they stand for and the life that they've led. And, you know, it's like there's some kind of ideological litmus test that we want to measure everybody up against. And, you know, we should be critical for sure. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be. You know, you absolutely have to hold people accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
But and there's no, that's non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. But, on the other hand, we're all living in the same screwed up world. And if we're here long enough, we're going to be covered with a little dirt, right?
Yep.
There's just no way around that. And if you're looking for somebody that's ideologically pure, you're never going to, I hate to break it to you, but you're never going to find that.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And that's just what it is. I'm not saying that you should go out there and try to find trouble. Therefore, you shouldn't. You should try to keep your hands clean as best you can. But don't worry if you get it a little bit dirty. Just and definitely don't worry about if the other guy's hands are a little bit dirty, because what do you expect?
Exactly. That I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. And I like that as a closer on the album, because it's a very reflective closer instead of a big noisy bombastic statement. It's more introspective.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. I love that the album closes in that fashion.
Thank you. Thank you.
So are you still a big basketball fan?
Still a big basketball fan. I still sit at the end of the Pistons bench. This was
nice.
I'm trying to think. This last season, which got cut short, of course, was my 45th or 46th season sitting on the Pistons bench.
Wow.
So, they still won't put me in a game. I asked Coach Casey, I said, I really think I could be a starting power forward in today's NBA. And he just shakes his head.
Maybe today's NBA, after it's canceled.
Well, maybe now, yeah, if the other guys don't want to play.
I heard a really cool idea, and I don't know who put it forth, and I think they were actually serious about this. And since they cut the season short, they were going to actually do competitive horse.
It really?
Yeah,
right.
like some of the NBA stars, they're gonna connect, kind of like you and I are online, and they're gonna play horse.
Oh, that's amazing! But I hadn't heard that one. That's cool.
Think that obviously that never happened, but I think that would have been a great. I would have watched it.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I would have watched that for sure.
Absolutely,
I would watch that for sure.
That would have been amazing. All right, so, and I have one question. This is about something off the album Crows, and this is kind of weird because I was listening to this, and the song "And They Never Saw Him Coming."
Oh yeah,
great song. And you mentioned, I wrote it down. Okay, you mentioned Dothan.
On the shoulder south of Dothan, the grave assembly whispered, and in their collective blood there was a drumming. Well, they sowed.
Oh, Dothan, yeah.
Now, is that the biblical Dothan or is that the Alabama Dothan?
That's the biblical Dothan.
Okay.
I mean, in Hebrew, it would be, most people pronounce it Dosan or Dotan, but it's, but yeah, it has to do with, and it's a place, it's a place in Israel, but it had the name of it in Hebrew suggests like a place of judgment, a place of where justice is executed, sort of.
Okay.
And the brothers, like Joseph's brothers, meet him there, and that's where they throw him in the pit.
Right.
And so that's what that. It's not a particularly good name for a place.
No, well, it's kind of funny because it's what struck me was that I lived about 30 minutes west of Dothan, Alabama.
No kidding. Right?
Yeah.
I've been through there.
So I used to live right off of Fort Rucker. So
no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Right.
Cool.
Right.
Cool.
Right outside of Daleville. So we used to go to Dothan for everything because there's nothing else.
Well, I used to sleep in my van in Phoenix City, Alabama.
Yeah, I know Phoenix with no O.
Yeah, with no O, exactly. I used to play at the Loft in Columbus, Georgia, and then I'd go over to Phoenix where there was, I think, some kind of forest or something, and go camp out over there.
Yeah, Phoenix City, the only town in Alabama on Eastern time.
I guess that's right.
Yep.
I guess that's
because it's so I think it's so close to Columbus or something that it was
right. So they wanted to keep it right.
Yeah.
That's the city.
Yes, because a lot of people would commute from one to the other for work, so they switched over to Eastern time. It's really weird.
That's wild.
Yeah, I used to be in sales down there, so I would have to travel all over the state, and you learn stupid stuff like that.
There's some nice places down there.
Oh yeah, it's hot down there.
So
that's one reason why steady work was actually the reason I ended up moving up to Virginia. But we still have family down there. So now, when things open up, are you gonna tour to support the album at all?
I don't know.
Was 6 straight years enough for you?
Well, I definitely. Well, it's funny that you've mentioned that because, to be honest, I really the part of it that I always miss is I really do like being up in front of people. I really like performing and hopefully giving them a nice show, a nice evening.
Yeah.
And but one of the problems is that because I tell stories, I tell jokes and whatever, and I don't develop those on a nightly basis. I got to do it in front of a different crowd every night, which I think why I was on. I had to be bouncing around so much in the old days, and my life doesn't really allow for me to do that anymore.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I definitely don't feel like I missed anything. I mean, I played every damn place that there is.
Yeah. 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel pretty good about it. But look, if somebody out there was like, we would totally pay you $1 million to go tour all over England again, I would do it in a heartbeat.
I would do it too. Man.
There's places I would love to go. I mean, I miss playing in New Orleans. I miss, there's a lot of places I miss.
Oh man. Well, if you ever get down to the DC area for a show, a tour, or a Wizards game, let me know.
For sure.
We got to meet up.
For sure. My boys were devastated that, speaking of the Wizards, my boys were devastated that the great Wes Unseld passed recently, who led the Washington Bullets to a championship in the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
And, some of the old Pistons guys that are, that live around us and we still see, they're always amazed. They're like, your kids know who Wes Unseld is? And I'm like, well, I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, you're basketball family, man. Come on.
Yeah, basketball family.
I wish they would go back to the Bullets. I thought that was a great name.
It was a good name. It was a good name.
Very better than the Wizards.
Yeah, I prefer the Bullets.
Oh, man. Well, all right. I have kept you for quite a while, man, and I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
How can people pick up the album?
Yeah, if they want to get it, it's on Spotify and SoundCloud and all the usual places, and I think that they can get it off the website too, which is just EthanDanielDavidson.com.
Is there a social media presence that they can follow you on?
Yeah, there's like Facebook and that, and it's which is just Ethan Daniel Davidson. They can find me on Facebook, and it's funny because I guess like the younger folks don't use Facebook so much anymore, and I barely use the telephone, to be honest. I mean, I'm pretty I'm a face-to-face person. I don't use computers or so much. So this COVID thing's been definitely an adjustment for me because I would have come down to see you otherwise. We could have had a bonfire in the backyard.
Oh, that would have been great. Yeah.
Next time.
I was actually burning stuff this weekend. We could have just kept it going.
Could have kept it going.
Grab a beer, shoot some stories.
That's it, man. That's it.
I'm telling you, I'd love to have you back on. Hear some more stories of the 6-year tour.
For sure.
If you wanted to talk old blues or anything else,
we can do that.
Let me know.
We could talk about building a boat and sailing the Yukon River. We could talk about the Detroit Pistons. We could talk.
Man, we need to do it.
Talk about how to cut down trees in the Arctic if you need to heat your house.
See, I could do a whole other hour with you just on your time in Alaska.
Yeah.
Alaska
was cool.
All right, we'll definitely have to work on that.
For sure.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your time. This has been a blast. It's been great getting to know you.
Yeah, it's good to get to know you too. Thanks for everything.
I was born in Macon, Georgia. Lost my daddy